We are, in fact, joined by Ajamu Baraka, the national organizer for Black Alliance for Peace, and Julie Varughese, who heads up the Black Alliance for Peace Solidarity Network. And I want to bring them both on. Good morning to you both to talk about this International Day of Solidarity. Good morning. Welcome to you both.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Julie, I did want to start with you, if you could, because reading from, and in fact, I did actually want to pull it up here, reading from the Black Alliance for Peace Solidarity Network demands Biden end war in Afghanistan from back in February. You all write that in response to the Biden administration suggesting it will not complete the withdrawal of U.S. forces per the Doha Agreement of February 2020, the Black Alliance for Peace Solidarity Network demands the United States end the war in Afghanistan. And then just elsewhere, Iron Mountain Daily News specifically, they write, today is the International Day of Action on Afghanistan. This day is to remind everyone that May 1st, 2021 is the deadline for the United States to pull troops out of Afghanistan per the U.S. Taliban agreement, also known as the Doha Agreement. Will the Biden-Harris administration abide by the terms of this agreement brokered in 2020? We are here to demand the United States end all involvement and pull its troops so the Afghan people can determine their collective fate. So, Julie, I did want to just start with you and ask you to talk a little bit about what, of course, is the Black Alliance for Peace Solidarity Network specifically, and then what is the importance of this International Day of Solidarity with Afghanistan.
Hi, thank you for having me on. So the Black Alliance for Peace Solidarity Network is a group of non-Africans who support the Black Alliance for Peace's mission and take direction from BAP's African leadership. And it's been together as a network since August, and I'm the coordinator. And the topic that they've mainly focused on is Afghanistan. And what was the other question that you had?
I was just asking just about the importance of the Solidarity Network itself, and the relationship, of course, to Afghanistan as an issue specifically.
Yeah. So as you know, a lot of African and colonized groups or political entities tend to have solidarity networks or solidarity committees. Usually it's a lot of white people, but it could be like other people, just anybody who is not that specific nationality or nation can participate, can support. So in this case, it is, a lot of white people, but a lot of other people. It's not just white people. So that's what the importance of the Solidarity Network is, that there's a way for people who are not African to participate, to support BAP's mission, not necessarily to participate. They don't make decisions for the Black Alliance for Peace. And regarding Afghanistan, it was the African leadership asked the Solidarity Network to take this on. And we have a good core of people. We created an Afghanistan committee within the Solidarity Network. It's about 8 people at this point, and they do a lot of work, and they're very self-motivated. I lay out deadlines and they just meet them, and they do really high quality work.
Right on. Thank you for that. Ajamu, to bring you in, I wanted to preface a question for you, and then of course, Julie, you can chime in as well in response. But I've been reading this book, Surveillance Valley, by Yasha Levine, and I'm admittedly late to this work, but it's been kind of messing with me in terms of his outline of the purpose historically for the creation of our what is now our digital media environment. And I just wanted to start with where he starts, and I just wanted to pull this up here and start with where he starts in the book with Oakland, California, and these domain awareness centers, or DACs, and a protest that he was covering in 2014, where he ends up, let's see, making note of the fact that the domestic awareness centers that were being promoted or brought into or attempted to be brought into Oakland, California, have a direct relationship militarily to not only increasing surveillance of activists and local citizens here in the United States, but to the drone strikes in Afghanistan that the same company, SAIC, which I thought I had pulled up here ready to go, but apparently not, is related, is part of this same sort of matrix or relationship. I have to come back to it in a second. But anyway, but the point is that these DAC centers have contracts with SAIC, this corporation that not only isn't going to be in control of surveilling or attempting to put American citizens and activists under surveillance, but is also literally controlling the drones that are being, that are showering warheads down on people in Afghanistan. So I thought of that. I thought I had it ready to go, but I thought, the point would be to lead you into this question of this importance of solidarity with, in this case, Afghanistan, and why Black Alliance for Peace finds it necessary to be in solidarity internationally with people of Afghanistan and other parts of the world.
Mm. Well, yeah, that's a very important question and a very important connection that you're raising, Jared. It points to a couple of things. One, of course, is the character of the neoliberal project. The neoliberal project that will farm out functions normally associated with the state to private companies, to both engage in the business of control and containment domestically, politically, but also to provide support to the more direct military apparatus and mission of the U.S. state abroad. So it's an interesting kind of phenomenon, but one in which we have to understand. And that's why we, in fact, are raising these issues around Afghanistan and other issues, making the connection between the functions and the reality of the national security state and the rest of us. And that is that we are opposed to the war in Afghanistan, not only because we're anti-imperialists, but we understand the thick matrix of relationships that has been established by the international bourgeoisie in order to maintain its global hegemony. And we bring that information to public awareness, making those kinds of connections as we are building opposition. And it's very difficult, Jared, because we are up against a tremendous apparatus, and an apparatus that's able to condition the public to take positions counter to their interests, take positions that in fact support the mission of the international bourgeoisie. That's why the work of this solidarity network has been so incredibly important in terms of the network taking the lead and developing the work that we have been attempting to bring attention to since the inception of the Black Alliance for Peace. We were one of the ones that were consistently raising the issue of Afghanistan, calling attention to the fact that the war in Afghanistan had been lost for more than 10 years, and that it was only an issue of white supremacist, psychology that prevented them from admitting that and beginning the process of taking the U.S. presence out of that country. So with the consolidation of the network under the tremendous leadership and coordination of Julie, we were able to take this work to another level. And as she indicated, we're really proud of the work that this committee's been doing. The Afghan committee, high-level work, consistent with the kind of high-level work that we've been putting out for the last 4 years. So, these are some of the connections we hope to make with raising this issue of Afghanistan, of prodding the rest of the anti-war community to to be a little bit more forthright and strategically focused on this issue of Afghanistan and all of the associated issues that we're going to talk about this morning connected to the Afghan issue.
Yeah, I see our comedians in the chat making fun of me. I said I've been talking about this book a lot, and yeah, I read a lot of different things all at once, and I take a long time. I'm slow. I come back and forth. I apologize, everybody. You know, I mean, you know, all these comedians. Yeah. But this is what I was really wanting just to highlight here very quickly. You know, that as he writes here, there was another wrinkle. Oakland had initially contracted out development of the DAC to the Science Applications International Corporation, a massive California-based military contractor that does so much work for the National Security Agency that it is known in the intelligence business as NSA West. The company is also a major CIA contractor involved in everything from monitoring agency employees as part of the agency's insider threat programs to running the CIA's drone assassination fleet. Multiple Oakland residents came up to blast the city's decision to partner with the company that was such an integral part of the U.S. military and intelligence apparatus. SAI facilitates the telecommunications for the drone program in Afghanistan that's murdered over 1,000 innocent civilians, including children, said a man in black sweater, so on and so on and so forth. So that was the point I was really wanting to draw out there very quickly. Anyway, and Julie, I did want to invite you to respond to anything from that quote that I finally did get to, or anything that Ajamu said. But I did also want to ask you both to respond to something else that was reported in light of today's, or at least reminded of us in terms of what today is all about. And from that same piece I was looking at earlier, it said, quote, when the U.S. President George Bush ordered the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan nearly 2 decades ago, he said, quote, the oppressed people of Afghanistan will know the generosity of America and our allies, end quote. Julie, today, what does that generosity look like for the people in Afghanistan? And again, you know, we're asking people to be in solidarity with these folks, and you would think that after 20 years of American generosity, there wouldn't be a need for any solidarity internationally. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on there that may have fallen off, I don't know, some of the news headlines, given all the other stuff that gets so much attention, that would require us to call for solidarity?
Yeah, so it's ironic that he would have said that, because at this point, 100,000 Afghans have died, innocent people. A lot of times the U.S. ends up attacking a wedding or innocent farmers just doing their job in the fields. And, you know, besides the deaths of 100,000 people, which in and of itself is horrendous over the past 20 years, there's been lots of injuries, lots of permanent disabilities as a result. And people are being exposed to chemicals in Afghanistan as a consequence. And there's a lot of disruption of their lives. So even if you haven't been killed or injured or disabled, you might end up having to flee your hometown. And a lot of people have ended up dispersing into neighboring countries like India, or going into trying to find a way to Europe. Like the big, if we remember a lot of the mainstream media coverage of refugees trying to get into crossing the Mediterranean, a lot of them were people from Afghanistan. They were actually walking or somehow getting to the Mediterranean Sea from Afghanistan. So that just indicates how dire the situation is, and that's very sad, because Afghanistan is a beautiful place with a ton of resources. In fact, Afghanistan has, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, had at least $1 trillion worth of minerals underneath its soil. That's what it was. That's what they guessed. There was $1 trillion worth of minerals under the soil. That could be the Afghan people could determine what to do with those minerals and decide how to build up their society. But instead, the U.S. Keeps its foothold there, and you know, it's been very disruptive. Because the U.S. is there, the Taliban has been attacking U.S. forces. The agreement with the Taliban, part of it was don't attack U.S. forces while we're in the run-up to the U.S. withdrawing from Afghanistan completely. That's been kind of mixed, but or I would say I can't comment on that so much, but the other thing is that the thing about generosity that's ironic that Bush was talking about is that his wife was sent over, and it's a very his wife was sent over to Afghanistan. It was used as kind of like an ambassador for women and girls, and that's been like a big narrative that's been used, is that we need to save the women and girls of Afghanistan from these brutes, from these barbarians that are like not allowing them to live their lives and be fully realized human beings. So that narrative has played on the U.S. public's and the Western public's sympathies, but it's a white supremacist narrative. It's like we need to save them instead of people over there figuring out how to liberate themselves. So that's a narrative still being played out today in the media. It's like, oh no, well, what would happen with the women? What would happen with the girls? All those what do you call it? The improvements that, or like the wins that have been, the things that have been won for girls and women. What would happen to all that if the U.S. pulled out? So that's been one thing going, and I probably have other things I can think of. I'm not remembering right now.
No, that's great. I mean, but I'm sure Ajamu, that the Kamala Harris and Bill Clinton recent unity around something around improving what are they came together to improve the lives of women here or something like that, around access to, I don't know, something, but the idea that Bill Clinton would be, after his 20 plus or so visits to Epstein's Island, would be involved in something about improving the lives of women. Maybe that program, though, could be extended to help with, these women in Afghanistan who clearly need more U.S. support for their condition. But Ajamu, did you want to add anything to that, or elaborate any further on this question or point of American generosity?
Only that I think Julie laid it out very clearly, and what she of course dealt with was that ideological justification for U.S. interventionism that's been at the heart of this phony, but in terms of consequence, real position of the responsibility to protect, which has been the basis of the kind of white saviorism that we've seen as a central component of the U.S. ideological tool used to give cover to U.S. imperialism. And that's not to say that there aren't complicated issues within these various nations. But as Julie said, it is the responsibility of the peoples in those particular nations to work through those issues themselves. We can't allow for the U.S. to manipulate the best instincts of the U.S. population to intervene into these situations, usually illegally, because the intervention has not been sanctioned by the United Nations Security Council, in order to save some population, because we know that basically the real interest is advancing the interests of the U.S. capitalist bourgeoisie. So we part of what we are doing with the Black Alliance for Peace, and one of the reasons why we are concentrating on these various issues, Haiti last week, Afghanistan today, the 1033 program that is responsible for militarizing the police forces. All of these issues are interrelated, and all are connected to the structural reality of the pan-European colonial capitalist project that we name as the enemy of all humanity. So, when people talk about, well, why are you all concerned about Afghanistan? Well, because we are part of collective humanity, and we understand these relationships. And so we say you can't understand, as you just pointed out, you can't understand some of the activities of a corporation in Oakland without understanding how that's connected to Afghanistan. They understand it. The enemy understands those relationships. We have to understand them also, because we have to be in opposition to them. So, time out for unsophisticated understandings of what we need to do as radicals and revolutionaries today. So we challenge ourselves, we challenge other so-called radicals to ground yourself, do the study, do the preparation necessary for us to be able to be more effective in confronting this enemy of all of humanity. So all of these issues are interrelated, and we raise them without apology, and we challenge people to understand these issues and to join us in this fight on behalf of global humanity.
Yeah, I just wanted to add too that brings us back to if you consider yourself a revolutionary, then it's necessary to be a materialist and to look at all of the information. So the enemy knows how to be materialist for their purposes. They know how to look at all the information. They know how to gather it. They know how to mobilize people. They know how to do what they need to do. Um, but then the narrative that they then deploy to the U.S. public would then be something that isn't based in material reality, and the U.S. public isn't being curious. I'm not even sure if I can't blame. I don't know, but the U.S. public is not doing the work. I'm not sure if it's because that's just the way it's people just get sucked into like watching mainstream media and that's it. But people are not doing the work to find out information themselves because they're depending on and trusting the corporate media that has interests in keeping the U.S. occupying all of these countries and continuing war around the world.
To that point, I did want to ask you both about this too. Speaking of books that I keep going back to and still keep reading all the time, slowly over years, is this book by Alfred and Secker, National Security Cinema: The Shocking New Evidence of Government Control of Hollywood. I just went back to in preparation for today, I just wanted to look again and just sort of as a reminder of all of the programming since from between 1911 and 2017 supported by the Defense Department in promoting militarism, the U.S. military, and targeting, in this case, the people of Afghanistan specifically with media. This is just films and television, all supported by the Defense Department, all designed to promote a positive U.S. and U.S. military image around the world. And one of the documents that they highlight here in particular, specific to how Afghanistan is depicted in the press and in film, or how, to your point about the materialism and how they use everything to their advantage, so to speak. And I'm sorry I can't make this any bigger, especially for myself, because my issues, my bifocal limitations here, struggling. But essentially what this piece, what this document is talking about is the Defense Department's involvement in a PBS documentary that was a PBS frontline investigation about Afghanistan, where they report having major problems about the way the U.S. military is depicted in that piece, and they look to limit their support and find ways to mitigate the impact of that documentary on the American people, all in part of making it difficult for the analyses that I think the both of you and BAP is representing to be easily arrived at by so many people in this country. So I did want to ask you both about, specific, to the issue of propaganda or popular culture, popular media, popular news reporting, the sort of difficulties or challenges that you all face in this work. I just wanted to invite some commentary or response to that particular question or that specific problem.
Well, I'll begin. I think you're pointing out a very important element of the weaponry used by the bourgeoisie to perpetuate, to maintain its hegemony. As as popular culture has developed the various kinds of innovations, from still photography, where during the conquest of North America, imagery was used to depict indigenous people as less than civilized, as part of the narrative of that justified the conquest of North America, to the movies that were then developed at the turn of the century, and famous movies like Birth of a Nation that was used to justify white supremacy, and radio shows, radio technology that was in use to communicate more effectively through storytelling the narrative of white supremacy and global dominance, to what we have today. With the expansion of Hollywood, television, with all the cop shows, Dragnet that was used to not justify, but to glorify the FBI. All of the SWAT shows and all the shows that had these detectives defending the public domain, and then the movies. These as the U.S. engaged in the so-called war on terror. Think about how the stereotype of the so-called terrorists, all of them Arab Muslims. So that becomes the condition, that becomes the image that we have that dehumanizes all Arab and Muslim people. But also it becomes the image that is used to justify, again, interventions. I mean, look at a couple of movies real quick. People might remember Zero Dark 30. This was like advanced like a women's liberation tale, because you had the main character, a white woman who worked for the CIA, involved in torture, but she had the mission to try to track down Osama bin Laden. Okay, and this is projected as progressive. This other nonsensical movie, Eye in the Sky, which was just a movie about these Europeans who were tracking these so-called terrorists. They tracked them to this house, and they're getting ready to drone strike the house. But they had to engage in this torturous conversation because there was a little black girl who set up outside and was selling some wares. And they were so concerned that if they hit the house, it was going to harm the little black girl. And we're supposed to believe that they make those kinds of considerations going up to the highest echelons of the U.S. and British government because of some little black girl. But that's the narrative. That's the propaganda they push. And we have to counter that. But we don't have millions of dollars in Hollywood. We don't have all these pundits that can come on to these shows, the mainstream media, and talk about, why we have to be mobilized against the Chinese, and why the Iranians are suspect, and why the Russians are not to be trusted. Why it's important to expand U.S. presence in Africa. What we have is Black Power media, but we're developing our own ecosystem of opposition, and it's very important. Okay, because while we don't have the numbers and the resources, what we do have is an analysis that can't be countered. And as we're gaining in our abilities, our capacities, and sophistication, we are able to, in fact, counter, because we are focused on what we're trying to build in terms of identifying the populations that we know are attempting to organize themselves, who are in contact with the masses of the people, and providing them the information they need in order to engage in this counter-hegemonic work. And that's why the work that we're doing and the work that is being headed up by this committee and this Afghan issue is so incredibly important. One of the things that they uncovered, and talking about these links again, is the think tanks that help to drive U.S. policy. And I hope that Julie talks a little bit about this Afghan study group that is the driving force, providing some of the rationale for policies by the Biden administration related to Afghanistan.
Julie, before you do that, I just want to quickly say that in that book I mentioned by Alfred and Secker, they talk a lot about the Zero Dark 30 film, and specifically how they gave the script in advance to the CIA to, quote, make sure they were absolutely comfortable with their portrayal in the film. So there's a lot more to be said about that film in particular, but yeah, you're right on point with that. Julie, yeah, talk about this what was it, the Afghan Study Group? Is that what it is? What was it called?
Yeah, it's basically a group of high-powered individuals, and they were asked to provide the Congress with a recommendation on what to do with Afghanistan. So this group of people, it includes a former senator named Kelly Ayotte, who's a Republican from New Hampshire, and now she serves on the board of News Corporation, which owns Fox News, and she also is on the board of Caterpillar, which is involved in construction. And then there is a retired general who was on the Afghanistan study group, but at one point he led U.S. forces in Afghanistan, and he now serves on the board of the military contractor Lockheed Martin. And then the third person who's on the Afghanistan study group is Nancy Lindborg, who at one point worked for the U.S. Agency for International Development, also known as USAID, what some of us refer to as the soft face of imperialism or the friendly face of imperialism, because the United States uses humanitarian aid to intervene into countries and basically subvert their own processes and violate their national sovereignty in the process. So these people represent, big business, military contractors, neocons, and they recommended to Congress that the United States do a conditions-based withdrawal. That means that they want to see a steady reduction in attacks, as well as an agreement between the Taliban and the US-backed Afghan government before the US would pull out. They also said the United States should provide an economic package of $50 billion per year to Afghanistan. But the Taliban has made clear that if the U.S. does not pull out after May 1st, which these people are saying stay in Afghanistan after May 1st. So the Taliban has said if the United States stays in Afghanistan after May 1st, the attacks on U.S. forces would resume. And the U.S. has a very weak position in Afghanistan at this point. They need to negotiate to get out of that country. So, and the Taliban also controls more than half of Afghanistan's territory. The Taliban is able to constantly either attack Afghan forces or just terrorize them. Just the idea of a drone or something flying above head just terrorizes Afghan forces into thinking that they're going to be attacked by the Taliban at this point. So, it's been 20 years of people being exposed to all of this violence, being run out of their country, and it's all because of these these players like the Afghanistan Study Group, like big military contractors. There's a lot more military contractors even now in Afghanistan than there is actual U.S. soldiers or forces. It's about a 3-to-1 ratio right now of private contractors compared to U.S. forces.
And just curious, real quick, how many of them would be attacked by Taliban forces if none of them were in Afghanistan? Just my bad.
But they have to stay for the women and the girls.
Right. I keep forgetting. Right. The women and the girls. Right.
They can't handle it by themselves. They're too low consciousness. They're barbaric. They need the U.S. help. Right. So.
Yeah. Right. What I did want to ask the both of you, to what extent does heroin still play a role in all of this, and the argument or the fight over the years, or the perspective over the years that when the U.S. has control over this region of the world, heroin flows And when the Taliban had control over this region of the world, the trade stopped or was severely cut down. Is there a relationship? Am I tripping here? Is that old conspiracy theory stuff? What can either of you help me out with that?
Well, the heroin situation, I don't have the exact numbers on like how much had flowed out of Afghanistan, but we can liken it to the cocaine flow out of South America. Like that's, the United States creates a market for these drugs and yet then says there's a war on drugs that the United States has to wage. So it's similar where United States has feels this need to. I don't have the facts on the heroin trade in Afghanistan. About to say it's a very suspicious link there that we haven't as a network as a Afghanistan committee delved into. But there was something else I wanted to talk about a little bit was
Sure.
I remember learning about the fact that when the communists were in power in Afghanistan, I remember learning that that's when women and girls had freedom. That's when they were allowed to go to school.
Right.
And the United States started intervening in 1979 and supporting the Mujahideens. These are backward people. If you're talking about backward people, so the United States has a pattern, has a history of supporting backward, wild individuals, elements so that it can wage war and destabilize whole regions. Now Afghanistan is destabilized. Can you travel through Afghanistan? Are you advised to travel there? Are people? It's a war-torn region, and it all encircles Iran, which I hope that Ajamu can talk about. But it encircles Iran. It's encircling China. Afghanistan is in the backyard of 3 different countries. I would say 4 different countries. You could say Pakistan, Iran, the former Soviet satellites, and China. And having this kind of destabilization in that region means that it makes it really easy for extremist groups to rise up. And the U.S. has been proven to back these kinds of groups.
So there were communists over there. There was socialists over there at one point, communists, materialists in this region of the world where all we hear about are people wanting to wage endless, quote unquote, holy war on the infidels of the West. And you talk about communists. Anyway, that's fascinating. That's very interesting.
It really is, and I'm so glad that Julie reminded us of that. That when you try to understand or unpackage Afghanistan, you got to go back. You got to go back to the period where you did have a socialist / communist government attempting to try to transform that space that was undermined by the U.S. And remember, it was Brzezinski who came up with this strategy of using some of the most extreme right-wing elements of Islam, the Wahhabis that that were always a force, but they weren't really organized. But they decided as a strategy to bring those forces together in Afghanistan to undermine the government there in that country it was part of the Cold War fight against the Soviet Union. And so coming out of that situation, of course, the Mujahideen, you had then the creation of the network or Al-Qaeda. Okay. So we got to remind people that when you deal with this, you got to make all of these connections, like we've been saying. And the heroin trade, it's not conspiracy. That basically when the U.S. invaded in 2001, that basically they put together what they call the so-called Northern Alliance. Who made up the Northern Alliance? Primarily the Afghan elements that were the main ones who had been disenfranchised, if you will, who were the ones who controlled the heroin trade. And they were very much in opposition to the Taliban. So this Northern Alliance was part of the Afghan elements to displace the Taliban and as always happened in Vietnam and happened in Central America. When the U.S. and CIA will align itself with these drug pushers, you had an explosion of the heroin trade again, and from that country. So these are kind of thugs the U.S. will align itself with, advancing its particular interests to the detriment of everybody else. And then they turn around, like Julie said, and talk about a war on drugs. Give me a break.
But Julie did mention, and I did want to ask the both of you about this anyway. The more about the geopolitical context of all of this. So, could you both, or Ajamu, maybe you start with the encircling of Iran, and really that entire region that Julie was talking about, or I think even asking you to talk about, but what is the broader geopolitical importance of Brzezinski called it the grand chessboard, but what else is going on maybe that in terms of why Black people even here need to be aware of this international context?
Yeah, well, that's why the information that the Afghan committee has been uncovering and putting on the website is so important, because they make all these connections. That's very, very important for people to understand. Afghanistan is key in terms of U.S. Geostrategic objectives. As Julie pointed out, it borders a number of key states, but more importantly, it is right in the middle of the route that's being developed by the Chinese, their Belt and Road Initiative. It is the gateway, of course, through Central Asia into West Asia, or what some people refer to as the so-called Middle East. So strategically, it is vital. And that's why many people argue that the U.S. is loath to leave that area. In fact, if you look at the fact that they have built a number of bases in that country that seem to have a permanent sort of character, that they're not really prepared to leave at all. And you have some very powerful elements in the foreign policy community that make a strong argument why the U.S. should not leave. It's a combination of a strategic block to the Chinese, but also strategically located in terms of the opposition to the Iranians, the attempt to try to continue to exert influence with Pakistan, and of course the material incentive, which is that $1 trillion worth of minerals under the ground in Afghanistan. So, it is a strategic location for the U.S. that's going to require us to demand that they get out, because they don't want to leave. And as Julie pointed out, when we talk about getting out of Afghanistan, we're talking about the entire U.S. presence. That's why we have to make a very clear distinction that we're not just talking about U.S. troops. We're talking about all elements of the U.S. presence, including their mercenary forces, the so-called private contractors. Okay, and so all of them have to leave, and also NATO, because NATO is the white supremacist structure that the white supremacists who call themselves the Atlanticists use to advance European and U.S. White power throughout the world. So we say all of them got to get the hell out of Afghanistan.
Yeah, there's right now 11,000 NATO troops compared to 2,500 U.S. troops. So we can't just talk about U.S. troops. And also, the NATO is controlled by the United States. It is a military arm of the United States. So when we talk about U.S. troops, we really should be saying all 14,500 U.S. troops, because they're all basically, even if they're from another country like Denmark or England, it's all U.S. operations.
So I only had one other question on my list, and then we can, if you all have time, we can get into the comments and chats a little bit, and then obviously if I haven't asked or invited something that you all want to share, please just let's get there. But where are we now? Because I thought I had been told for the better part of the last 6 months that once we got Biden and Kamala in office, that we could push them to the left and see some change in the world that we haven't seen over the last 4 years. What happened to that? Where are we with that? Because I thought we started with me reading that Biden wasn't going to adhere to the Doha agreement, and it seems like a lot of the same stuff. So what's up with that? What happened to the push them to the left argument in that crowd? Where are they?
So on the campaign trail, he said nothing would fundamentally change. He stuck to that. So, what Biden is doing is just a continuation of what Obama and Trump have been doing. Obama started that pivot to Asia policy. Trump accelerated the rhetoric, more aggressive rhetoric, increased the tariffs. He had actually completed phase one of the China trade deal with China, and then suddenly tariffs, right? So, and now Biden is just continuing the rhetoric and even accusing China of doing the same thing that Trump was accusing them of doing, not sharing all of the information about the COVID-19 situation. So it's a lot of stuff with Biden. But Biden is also saying, last month he was quoted as saying, it's very unlikely we're going to, we can't move out because it's too dangerous. We have to wait until, maybe August. We can't do it now. It's just too soon. But why is it too soon? Literally, it's been the same people in power in the United States all this whole time. So there's not really. So for them to say it's too soon just means that they're trying to delay a process that they want to keep going. So I'm sorry. What was your question?
No, that was it. Just what happened to the push him to the left argument? That's it.
I will, continue with that and echo what Julie just said, and also remind everyone who's listening to this that as Julie said, Biden has been consistent. He said nothing would change, and nothing has changed. But also in nothing changing, things have gotten more dangerous, because even though he said nothing is going to change, what they started doing behind the scenes, though, in fact, has been to make some alterations in U.S. policies as it relates to what was done under the Trump administration, and alterations that are ending up to be more dangerous under Biden than they were under Donald Trump. I mean, so we have the situation with Afghanistan. Remember, it was the Trump administration that initiated this peace, so-called peace process, and came up with the agreement. It is the Biden administration that is now undermining that agreement. Iran, we thought that when Biden came into office, that there would be a return of the U.S. back into the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iranian deal. But look at what's happening. They are taking the same position that the Trump administration took in terms of trying to coerce Iran into following a foreign policy that's more in alignment with U.S. interests in the so-called Middle East. And the Iranians are saying, we are a sovereign nation. We determine our own relationships. And if you all are serious about this agreement, come back into the agreement. So that hasn't happened. Same thing with North Korea. Tensions are starting to escalate again between the U.S. And North Korea because of the incompetency of the foreign policy folks who the Biden administration has brought back into the fold. Africa, the expansion of AFRICOM continues, and now we were the first ones, the Black Alliance for Peace, to warn people about what's going to happen in Mozambique, because you have the same playbook that basically whenever you have a serious economic interest, like Mozambique having one of the largest deposits of natural gas on the planet, then you have a situation that's created where, the Mozambican government needs to bring in the U.S. and other European forces in order to protect itself because of an escalation of so-called terrorist activities. And now what we got the U.S. Special Forces now going into Mozambique, and we got situation in Ethiopia. We got the whole situation, the continuation with Somalia. It goes on and on and on. It's getting more dangerous, the world, than it even was under Donald Trump. And look what's happening with China, okay? And Ukraine. and the pivot to Asia. You have the U.S. and their madness, believing that, and its policies, many people argue that they can effect a first strike against the Chinese and against the Russians. They are they are playing with the idea of deploying intermediate range missiles in both Asia and in Europe, where they can effect a first strike against those two nations. So, we time out for being being naive. These folks are dangerous. In many cases, these Democrats are now the real war party, and they're more dangerous than the stereotypical so-called far right.
And besides the foreign policy issue with everything getting more dangerous externally outside the United States, there was a report that just came out that said that now more than ever, that Biden's been transferring more military hardware to local, state, and federal police agencies in the United States than Trump ever did. And this is with Biden, I think it's been less than 100 days.
Yeah, the 2 months.
It's only 2.5 months. And he's already transferred more military hardware. He could say, "Oh, I didn't do it. That's a 1033 program." No, basically, it's under his presidency. So it's getting more dangerous, around the world because of U.S. policy, and it's getting more dangerous in the United States because of U.S. policy.
Well, he did promise, as in addition to what you all pointed out to, he did also promise he was going to increase police spending, while everybody at least so many people kept telling me, and specific to the point you raised, Ajamu, a lot of people said specifically he's going to be an improvement on relations with Iran. So that's why we have to support him in this election. And yet here we are. So that's fascinating. Is there anything that I haven't invited either of you to say about this issue as I quickly scroll through some of these comments and chats and invite people to restate any questions that I may miss in this quick scroll that you all have pressing for our guests? But is there anything that I haven't invited either of you to say that we need to get to?
Well, Netfa, our friend and comrades from the Black Alliance for Peace, says that your guests are just jaded against America and anti-American values.
Right. Right. That's clearly. Well, what's up with that? You anti-Americanists, you jadedists. You jaded cynics.
You could call us the real globalists because, we actually care about the whole globe, not just all of humanity and the animals and the plants, the whole earth, not just these, this one group of, European settlers over here in the United States that weren't supposed to be here in the first place. So, no.
That's interesting. I like that term, the real globalists.
The real globalists.
And we got to remind people that, the U.S. and Europe make up 10% of the population. Okay. It's absurd that these groups of nations will continue to not only consume up to 40% of the Earth's resources, but to be in this position to attempt to dictate how collective humanity is going to develop over the next few decades, to create a condition in which the possibility of some kind of nuclear exchange between the US and Europe and China or Russia is more of a possibility than ever before, because not only do you have the desperation of this declining US power, but the very character of the policymakers in the US in particular has deteriorated so significantly. These folks are incompetent. They don't know what the hell they are doing. Okay? That's what makes them so incredibly dangerous.
Actually, one of our Solidarity Network members, Zach Kerner, was in the comments. And you had pulled up his comment. He had said that that Raytheon got a $145 billion contract last year to train the Afghan air forces. I mean, this is what we're talking about. People need to view things materially, because as materialists, because the enemy views things in material terms. So, and in the meantime, they're uh, I guess they're kind of like doing kind of like a number on the U.S. public and on the Western public. Though I would say there's a lot of people who are not necessarily, they don't buy into that, and they're not necessarily politicized. And I think that's like the key for organizing is that, we have a bunch of people in the United States who don't trust the corporate media, but they're not getting the right information because we can't access them because we don't have access to the corporate media. So if they could find Black Power media on YouTube, that's great. But it's like sifting through like a haystack, and also with the algorithms that are the algorithms may very well be keeping you down because a lot of those videos of cats and cooking get millions of views, but you're not getting millions of views.
Not yet. Zach, I'm just playing. But the quick point I just wanted to raise that I think Zach points to also in this comment that I just want to highlight is that this is Biden's Secretary of what is it, Defense? Is that what it is? What is he? What is Austin? Yeah.
Austin.
Yeah. So and that's Biden's guy, and Biden's black man guy.
Exactly.
On top of that, by the way, so that's also I think an important point about that as well.
Secretary.
The first black, and then this issue of think tanks that because I think Ricky and Sharice are tripping because we know that the U.S. cares terribly about Muslim populations wherever they may be, anywhere in the world. So I don't accept. That's why they were so concerned with making sure Bin Laden got his Islamic ritual burial, right? When they said they got him, remember they said that they said that's why. I'm sorry, my bad. I'm sorry. Woo! I'm sorry. That would.
It is comical. It is. Comical.
I mean, I'm sorry. But to your point, Julie, that I think the reason why I keep going back to that Alfred and Secker book is because I do think a lot of people are clear that commercial news media are not to be trusted. But I actually don't think a lot of people are consciously enough aware of how this messaging seeps into what they consider to be their entertainment media. So that's why I think so much effort has been spent in developing all of these narratives and putting them into television shows and movies and why even I think somewhere in the chat people have pointed out and that in other books, Operation Hollywood's another good one where they talk about why we see the same headlines that are being carried in mainstream news on CNN that we avoid there are running as narratives thematically in our quote unquote favorite bingeable TV shows and stuff like that. So it's intentional, and there's thousands of them as they point to as examples. Yeah.
You know what's really dangerous is the video games that let people kill. Right. That let people hunt down and kill Maduro in Venezuela, stuff like that. So people get to be in the driver's seat, supposedly, of being the CIA agent who hunts down and gets this supposed dictator. And that's really dangerous because it's little kids playing these games, it's adults playing these games, and they have no clue. I mean, I think that they have no clue unless they're playing the game, but then also reading, doing the kind of reading and study that we do. And they have no clue that Maduro is that was none of our business to be even doing anything like that. Or I'm sorry, not but none of the U.S.'s business to be doing anything like that. The other thing I wanted to mention was, besides the video games, was I'll get back to it, but maybe Ajamu can talk.
Sure.
Well, the cultural element is so incredibly important. I mean, it's cultural and ideology. And sometimes, folks don't understand the importance of the struggle, where, again, the opposition does. I mean, the scholarship coming out now that's making the connections between popular culture and U.S. intelligence, it's good, but it's not even that unique or new. Because those things have been seeping through for quite some time, even to the extent, for example, that it was revealed that the CIA was behind propping up visual artists back in the 1960s and 50s to counter the abstract art movement, impressionism in the U.S. to counter Soviet realism artistically. So they understand the power of culture sometimes better or much better than we do. So the fight that we are involved in is on every level. It's not just enough to have the proper and correct ideological orientation. You have to have the cultural tools also to be able to communicate, to understand the different areas of engagement, and to be able to enter into those areas to contest the bourgeoisie. And so, the responsibility for developing the kind of cadre we have to develop in spaces like the Black Alliance for Peace and other places is incredibly important in terms of equipping our folks with the skills that we need to counter these folks and to be in a position to advance our forces when we have the opportunity to, in fact, to do that. So, we are in a real sophisticated fight, and we've got to understand that and prepare ourselves for that. And that's what we're trying to do with the Black Alliance for Peace. The Black Alliance for Peace is a training ground in many ways, and our people, we got some of the baddest Africans in the country in this formation, and our allies in this formation. So, we are preparing ourselves. We're doing some pretty decent work with no real money at all. We don't get no foundation because ain't nobody going to give us no money. We ain't getting none of that.
I heard you say with my Luke Mon crew the other day that you didn't get any that 90 million that Black Lives Matter. I was looking in the fine print of all those reports for a Black Alliance for Peace line.
Yes.
I just didn't see it,
Yes.
So that was
you need double bifocals for that.
Hey, real quick again, just real quick to one of my other go-to books that I was looking at real quick again today because was just looking for Afghanistan references, to be honest, real quick. And to your point about this Frances Stoner Saunders book and the CIA, the Cultural Cold War, where she talks about one example here of a CIA operative who wrote a book about Afghanistan. I believe this is in the 50s, early 60s, maybe. And they talked about very explicitly, the CIA did, about the importance of this kind of work. And they say, she quotes him here saying, "Books differ from all other propaganda media," wrote a chief of the CIA's covert action staff, "primarily because one single book can significantly change the reader's attitude and action to an extent unmatched by the impact of any other single medium. Such to make books the most important weapon of strategic long-range propaganda. Now, that was written at a time before digital media, so I think that might be challenged now. And to your point, she also talks a lot in that book about other artistic methods that were used, specifically the one you brought out yourself. So I just think we should never underestimate that at all, for sure. Anyway, listen, any last comments again, other than to remind people to join BAP to support BAP and the baddest Africans on the planet. Anyway, sorry, I didn't ask either of you a specific question, but yeah, go ahead, Ajamu. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I would just say before Julie closes us out that this is a very important day. And we hope that people participate in it. And we hope people understand, the follow-up that's going to be required beyond today, because, the U.S. is angling that to leave, and that's going to probably end up with escalation of hostilities and then an appeal to the public to support a counter-escalation on the part of the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so people can get involved. We encourage everyone to go to blackallianceforpeace.com/day of action on Afghanistan. That's blackallianceforpeace.com/day of action on Afghanistan. And there they can download the social media graphics. They can check out materials that they can use to write an op-ed to get published in a local newspaper. They can they can download a template that they can copy and paste to send a letter to the editor of a local newspaper. And we also have a new fact sheet that we just put up on the page last night. It's a fact sheet on the the U.S. Taliban agreement itself that accompanies the other fact sheet that we have about the Afghanistan study group. We also encourage people to use the Mayday Afghanistan hashtag Mayday Afghanistan, as Patterson has pointed out and Sharice has pointed out. So, and then, people might be, turning their noses up at the concept of like writing a letter to the editor or an op-ed, but you have to think about it in terms of the digital age. When you write a letter to the editor nowadays, it gets posted on that newspaper's website. So now it's not just a local letter, it's an international letter at that point. And also local newspapers, I mean, I used to work at them. I will say, they don't really, there's not much in the way of you getting your letter to the editor published at a local newspaper. I mean, you should have seen some of the letters that they used to run in local newspapers when I worked at them. And that's when local newspapers actually existed. Now they're all turned into websites, or they're just like folded into other newspaper operations. So, so we encourage people to, so the point is, we understand that the Biden administration has probably already made up its mind about what to do with Afghanistan. So that's not the point. The point is not to change the Biden administration's mind. The point is to raise the public's awareness about the Afghanistan issue and about how it affects all of collective humanity and the people in the United States, and then taking action from that perspective. So that's why just talking about it with your neighbors, with your friends, writing letters to the editor, doing those op-eds, going on social media and using the hashtag Mayday Afghanistan are all crucial. And of course, you can use all of our materials to also host or organize a teach-in. You can host a teach-in on Zoom. You could host a teach-in in person. It's up to you. We don't have a guide necessarily that we created for that, but we trust the people to figure these things out for themselves. But we gave you the tools to act with the information, the facts that you can use to actually have these conversations. So we just encourage everybody to go to blackallianceforpeace.com/day of action on Afghanistan and spend the whole day today figuring out how to raise the consciousness of the U.S. public.
Right on. Well,